Good morning and thank you for tuning in. This is Walter Mithkite reporting for GNM, the Gielinor News Network. Sweeping changes in the monetary policy of Jagex is what players woke up to this morning. Citing increasing rates of inflation, Jagex has increased the tax rates at the Grand Exchange, doubling them from 1% to 2%. Many players are enraged, upset that the tax rate on the sale of goods at the Grand Exchange has doubled. Curious as to what effect this might have on the economy, we reached out to the University of Ardun, who has graciously allowed their renowned economist Eugene Dinvin Beverk to serve as our economics pundit for today's broadcast. Dr. Dinvin Beverk, thank you for appearing on today's show.
No, thank you, Walter. These tax changes are sure to make those that use the Grand Exchange very animated. What questions do you have?
First, I suppose I'll ask whether or not this will have the impact that Jagex claims it will.
In general, should everything else remain relatively unchanged, I would argue that yes, this should inflict some deflationary pressure on prices. I must emphasize that I say deflationary pressure and not deflation. I imagine that prices will continue to rise as gold enters the economy faster than this marginal increase in the tax rate will cause gold to leave it. I am merely stating that inflation will occur at a lower rate than would otherwise have been the case had Jagex not increased the GE tax rate.
And why should adventurers be worried about inflation?
Well, it depends who they are. If they are an adventurer with a large amount of assets as opposed to gold, inflation does not hurt them as much. If anything, inflation increases the market value of their assets as the money supply expands more rapidly than the supply of the assets they own. For example, if we assume the demand remains the same over the course of a particular season, should the supply of gold increase at a faster rate than the supply of, say, twisted bows, we could wisely expects that the twisted bows would become more expensive on the market. The adventurer being made wealthier due to having a twisted bow is only being made wealthier due to the inflation. Now, if you imagine adventurers that was holding onto gold coins instead, you could wisely assume that over a particular period of time that they were becoming poorer. Not because they were doing something unwise like buying armor trimming services, but because they had held onto a commodity that was increasing its supply at a higher rate than the things they could exchange it for. In short, adventurers holding on to large amounts of coins should be helped by this deflationary pressure they're enacting, and adventurers holding on to large amounts of assets will be hurt in a relative sense.
Oh, so only people that are holding on to assets are being made worse off here, huh?
Oh, sorry, I should have been more clear here. This tax is extracting wealth from everyone that uses the Grand Exchange. Whether you hold primarily assets or gold coins, if you sell an item, you are now worse off than you otherwise would have been, as the tax rate is higher. Because of the convenience the GE creates for adventurers. They may not admit it, but the GE is most likely producing way more value for them on more sales than this 2% tax would cost them. Truthfully, Jagex cannot make a change to tackle inflation without creating some groups of winners and losers. If they were to tackle inflation at its source by confiscating gold from monsters before the adventurers could slay them, then the adventurers who slay those monsters would be worse off than they otherwise would have been. Every adventurer who does not slay those gold-dropping monsters would be made better off as their income is not hurt, and their income they are earning somewhere else would be able to buy them much more goods on the Grand Exchange.
Interesting. Do you think Jagex made the right decision here?
I am no fan of the inflation, but I would prefer that Jagex slows the release of gold coins and alchemists to monsters that inevitably drop to the adventurers. That said, I imagine this additional 1% will not have that large of an effect on the average adventurers use at the Grand Exchange. Sure, they may not like paying it, but these are still the same adventurers that sell all of their items at 5% under the market value anyways. I mean, those adventurers should be more concerned that their impatience eats up their margins much more than their tax does.
I actually just saw a producer weave, wince, and grow a little pale as you called out adventurers for selling all of their items short. It seems you embarrassed him. What do you make of Jagex's changes to the list of items they use a portion of the tax revenue to buy items off the market?
Ah, yes, the item sink. Whatever items are on this list, Jagex is essentially enabling more of these items to come into the games than would otherwise be the case. At some level, Jagex is putting an upward pressure on demand for these items with these tax-financed purchases. It is worth noting that, yes, this purchase also reduces the supply, but between the decrease in supply and the increase in demand, this is one double whammy of an upward pressure on the prices that only incentivizes adventurers to slay more monsters that drop those items than would have otherwise been the case. Take the Fang of Momentum, for example. Many adventurers report that this item is to be the best one-handed sword in the game, and yet it is relatively cheap. Jagex aims to push the price of this item up by using taxed coins to remove them from the game. This may work in the short term, but all this tax does is create winners out of the adventurers that raid the tombs of a mascot and losers out of everyone else who doesn't. I also imagine that it is a fair assumption that as the low end of the purple chests of the Tombs of the Mascots are bought up in market value, more players will flock to the raid, further pushing the value of the higher items down, which are also on the item sink list. Sure, one might say that this rate of fangs and light bearers being sunk won't increase the prices past their current level, but to that I would reply that in the future, the prices of these assets will be higher than would have otherwise been the case. Without reducing the drop rates of these items that are overpowered relative to their rarity, Jagex is only treating symptoms and not bringing about a solution. This is particularly sad because there is an opportunity cost to Jagex using tax revenue to sink these items, which could be sinking other items that have high drop rates that mirror their utility, or not sinking items and further reducing the gold supply. Unfortunately, Walter, I have a lecture that starts soon and I cannot help my students from waiting. They make this comment about, oh, if you're late, I'm legally allowed to leave. Ha! Get out of here. As much as I have loved sharing with your viewers today, I am sure they do not want to hear a lecture on marginalism in the subjective theory of value, so I must do that lecture there instead of here. Goodbye.
What I would give to be in that economics class. Something is funny about that Ardunian accent, though. Maybe Dr. Din Vinbavert traveled a lot as a child. In other news, folks, Gommel is now offering adventurers combat achievement points for taking on Yama in interesting ways. Our producer would be able to shine some light on what he thinks the difficulty of achieving them will be, but he has been too busy maxing the last 2 weeks to have any idea on the state of Yama. He did have this to share.
Hello, Gielinorians. Thank you to all of you who attended my max party. It was a lot of fun. I hope the items I dropped are able to be put to good use, or at least to be sold. If you did sell, I really hope you sold before this recent tax increase. My next goal is clearing the Inferno, and I want to do it with a twisted bow. But right now, I'm somewhere between 100 and 200 million coins short. It seems that after the maxing party, I have some gold to go and earn back. And now I need to earn 1% more since Jagex is stealing double the amount of my earnings in the form of taxes. Ugh. Well, currently, I'm trying to green log some Slayer bosses while I wait for raid teams to show up. In any case, thank you for your support. Gielinor News Network is only able to continue broadcasting because of the support from viewers like you that like and subscribe to this broadcast. Back to you, Walter.
Congratulations on maxing again, Weave. Finally, we want to remind viewers that Dead Man Mode All-Stars begins today. Be sure to tune in live to the participants' channels on your ComOrb. If you cannot watch any of the live broadcasts, the Mission Solo channel on the RuneTube app on your ComOrb will have an update video throughout the week. With that reminder out of the way, I must apologize for my breakdown last week. Some of you tried to comfort me by sharing that you were also upset to hear that I would not be the announcer of the event, but it was highly unprofessional of me to cry on the broadcast. Please forgive me. Gielinor News Network strives for excellence, and I fell short last week. With that said, our broadcast this morning is now coming to a close. This is Walter Mithkite for GNN, signing off.